Straight-tusked elephant, Loch Ness. Below the sea of pine and oak and thorn, yet unnamed Loch Ness sparkles in its glen. The elephant cow, as tall as 3 men, domed bulk hidden by the great hawthorn wall, pushes smooth white tusks like ivory needles through the branching boughs. Long shafts as straight as poles until their end-curved tips. Tusks to frame that trunk that grasps and shears the spiked stems. I hold my flint-headed spear, motionless. Hands dry, held breath, as still as certain death, should she sense me where I crouch unseen. I've never felt before such power, presence. She knows I'm here, feels my fear, even foretells her end song by my being. Yet, the matriarch with the long straight tusks moves on into deeper, darker wood. My insubstantial body drops dead down, and I lie a long while so, in silence, before I move too, back to the coming world, the whittling world of men. I've been writing a series of poems, mainly variations on the sonnet form. So long sonnets, short sonnets, 20-line sonnets, about human encounters with extinct animals. Human encounters with animals that they could not possibly have seen in their lifetimes at present. Animals made extinct that once roamed the British Isles. Writing poems like this, I'm writing them in the first person, and writing poems like this was quite accidental. I was writing a novel where my main character, a tame academic named Richard, is interested in ecological restoration, rewilding, reforesting, and he's visiting the last remaining woodlands of Britain. In the woodlands, he experiences a series of seizures, possibly epileptic seizures, possibly brain tumor seizures, but he experiences a series of seizures that are quite visionary, where he seems somehow to have been twinned with a Paleolithic artist. And when he wakes from his seizure state, from his almost semi-comatose state, he finds he's written an entire poem. And the poem describes a meeting, a realistic meeting, with some animal that once walked that area, but has long since been gone. So, hence Richard's accidental poems of extinction. And there's the straight-tusked elephant. I must tell you that Richard didn't write any of those poems. He's a character in a novel. So to write any of the poems, I had to research the extinct animals and then start writing. And for each of the poems, I had to imagine what it might have been like to have been a Stone Age individual coming across an animal which may have even been on the verge of extinction even then. And sometimes a dangerous animal, certainly a rare animal, and what the feeling would have been like, what kind of strong emotional response would have been engendered in that individual. What would it feel like to suddenly come across a woolly mammoth? What would it feel like to come across a straight-tusked elephant in the Stone Age, where your only weapon is a flint spear? Or if you're an artist, your only weapon is your little bag of paint and some paintbrushes. So I've always been interested in human-animal encounter poetry. Ted Hughes, D.H. Lawrence, Snake, Ted Hughes and Otter. There's almost a subgenre in poetry on human-animal encounters, but there are not a lot of human extinct animal encounters in poetry. Possibly the reason is that poets tend to write about what they can experience, and it's very hard to experience an animal that your predecessors have wiped from the face of the planet. So when I started Googling poems of extinction, I thought, okay, I've got to write Richard's poems for him. So let's see. I Googled poetry of extinction. There isn't much. Poems, extinct animals. There aren't many. So, how do you write poems of extinct animals? You have to imagine them. So, in each case, I had to put myself into the place of possibly Richard's Paleolithic twin and see what it would have been like to meet that animal. And along the way, I must tell you that I found it fascinating doing the research for each of the poems. That's the start of the thing. It's fascinating reading about the animals that once roamed Britain. They were here until a very short time ago, geologically speaking an eye blink, historically speaking only a few thousand years. And we've managed to wipe them out in quite an alarmingly short time. So when I set to writing, I was unprepared for the depth of feeling that I would experience about the meeting of some Stone Age individual and an extinct animal I could have had no contact with. And I wondered if readers might find it similarly, just if some readers might experience an emotional connection for the first time between an extinct animal and themselves. And that set me to wondering as well, would that help to stimulate some sort of thinking about what animals are going to be made extinct in their own lifetimes? That was a question. Perhaps they might even be interested in stemming extinction. Perhaps they might be interested in reintroducing some of the animals that we've lost from the British landscape back into the British landscape. So it was just starting the process of writing these poems was an interesting thing entirely. So some of the animals that my character Richard's twin meets, or my character Richard meets, via his strange seizures in the forest, are animals that we can bring back, things that have been made locally extinct, like boar, or beaver, or bear, or lynx, or wolf. Some of them have been made extinct forever, such as our woolly mammoth. When you encounter... another thing that set me thinking with writing these poems was, surely there will be other poets and better poets who can write poems about presently endangered animals. Not so much extinct animals, but what about animals that are endangered now and ones that a really established poet really cares about? Well, wouldn't that help the public to care about the animal that's about to disappear from the face of the earth? So, to save an animal such as the rhino, one needs to have enough members of the public to care about it, to know the sense of awe that one might experience when one encounters one of these animals unexpectedly, almost nose to nose and almost face to face in the wild. That happened to me about 1.5 years ago, almost literally bumping into this black rhino who was not impressed and let us know it. But it was an amazing encounter, and it's an amazing experience when you meet an animal in the wild and it's powerful and it doesn't really care about you. You're not part of its world. There's a certain magic in an experience such as that. So I was hoping other poets might actually get stuck into the same kind of thing. Now, I'm not the only one to have an experience with rhinoceros. Richard, 15,000 years ago on the Jurassic coast, had an experience where he also met some rhinoceroses. Very near Lyme Regis today. But Lyme Regis wasn't there at that stage. And the woolly rhinoceroses are not there either. And that's the point. And visitors to the Jurassic coast looking for fossils, they know the fossils of animals that went away 65 million years ago or 165 million years ago. They don't think about the animals that went away 10,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago. These ones only disappeared from the British landscape about 10,000 years ago. That's an eye blink. So that's the woolly rhinoceros. And when you do come across an animal like that, you realize you're meeting a unique animal from a unique species. And it's taken billions of years, not just millions, but billions of years, all considered, for that exact animal to be in that exact place. But we seem to wipe them out with alarming regularity and very, very fast. So I was wondering, could it be possible that some of these poems might be useful to stem the tide of extinction? Could reading poetry actually help people decide they want to save some animals that are still alive now that they might not have otherwise thought of? Well, I must tell you that researching for these poems, I was amazed at the diversity of species we used to have here 50,000 years ago, and then even 10,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, far more species and subspecies than we have now. We may have species left, not many, but very few subspecies of those. So it was quite a shock realizing what an incredibly impoverished ecosystem we have. The next thing to astound me was the sheer size of some of these animals that we've lost. The Elasmotherium, this may have given rise to the legend of the unicorn. The Elasmotherium was the size of a mammoth, could gallop like a horse. One horn. And how would you like to meet that? On, say, the plains of, the great savannah of Devon. It would be fun. I was terribly saddened that we'd lost animals like this, and that we can never have them again. Once something like that is gone, it's gone. We're not going to recreate it. The third thing that absolutely astounded me was the unique strangeness, the exuberant strangeness of some of these animals that we've lost. And then I thought, wow, we're losing animals fast. What happens in 2116, only 100 years from now? Maybe people then will be thinking, wow, elephants, giraffes, look how strange they must have been. It could happen. The IUCN, or the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, says that half of our 5,500 mammal species are in decline. We could face a situation where 1,000 mammal species go extinct in the next 100 years. They're shocking figures, and something radical has got to be done. So I was terribly disturbed that we could erase so quickly such an amazing array of mammal species, of animal species. And I was only investigating mammals and birds, and in truth, mainly the big mammals. I just thought we've impoverished our landscape and our human experience so much already. We need to stem extinction now and do it forever, and to do so we need to do something radically different from what we have been doing in conservation. Researching for the poem has made me aware of the huge crisis of extinction facing the wild species we do have left. They are going fast, and mainly from, well, hunting and poaching, yes, but mainly from the loss of habitat, as the global human footprint of clearing wild, more and more wild and semi-wild land for commercial exploitation expands at a rapid clip. Everything we use comes from somewhere, and it's usually coming from somewhere that used to be wild. So, I wondered if I could build into each poem some way of eliciting an emotional connection between the reader, the place, and the extinct animal. And so into each sonnet, because they're mainly sonnets, although they're strange sonnets, into each sonnet I've built a recognizable British landmark. And then I'm in the hope that when a reader reads one of the poems, they will connect the grey wolf in the Brecon Beacons, the cave bear in Yorkshire, you know, the cave hyena somewhere else, there's cave hyena in Plymouth, or the lynx in between the great sarsen stones of Stonehenge. My thought was, what if a young person reading about a lynx making a kill in between the great stones at Stonehenge, as an adult works tirelessly to reintroduce the Eurasian lynx to a re-wooded Dartmoor, or re-wooded Cairngorms, or re-wooded Brecon Beacons? That would be inspirational. So I wondered if Richard's poems, my poems, Richard's poems, could actually make a difference. So, in fact, there's our Eurasian lynx. That's a recent cave painting. And perhaps someone would be inspired by a poem about the Aurochs, the giant wild species of cattle that we once had in Britain also. Bulls that stood 6 foot or more at the shoulder. That's an impressive sight. If you're going to run across a field, that's a good one to run from. Apparently they would attack you mercilessly if you were on a horse and if you had a weapon, but if you were unarmed, they would leave you alone. That's the legend anyway. So, my poem, Aurochs, or Richard's poem, Aurochs in Goldcliff. The 20-line sonnet, Aurochs in Goldcliff, is a sonnet about a Paleolithic artist picking mica flakes out of the cliff on the prehistoric seashore that eventually becomes the town of Goldcliff in Wales, Don't look for them now because they've been covered in limestone. But here it is, Aurochs, Gold Cliff. I worked in silence at the cliff's base because the bull was near, guarding his cows. Magnificent in his muscled wildness, white eel stripes snow-line down his charcoal back, proud bull king to his chestnut harem herd, grazing sedge shoots with his calves by the stream. Then at sunset, my pouch, only 1/3 filled with shining flakes like dragonflies' wings, the other bull came. And I and the king could read the jet's strength, judge the young bull's size. Taller at the shoulder, his chest as broad as the king's. Smooth flanks, yet unscarred by lions. Great belly and balls. Princely horns thrust high. They fell to as the sun blazed out in fire. They drowned the darkening swish of the sea with their bellowing crash of horns on horns. And though I could not see its red, the reek of blood from each torn gash cloyed in my mouth, on and on till it was done and quiet as death, but for the rasp of one bull's breath. The last Aurochs bull, the last Aurochs, died in captivity in 1627, but it's gone, and it's gone forever, no matter how many backbreeding programs there are, because there are. My hope is that the sonnet, Richard's sonnet, might inspire someone, perhaps someone here, might challenge someone here to make sure that we don't lose the European bison, or the brown bear, or the griffon vulture, or moving further afield, the African elephant, or the oryx, or the polar bear, or insert animal name of your choice here, because they're all up for grabs. I do believe there is a viable and very simple antidote to further extinction. The ecologist E.O. Wilson has proposed the concept of half-Earth, for just half the world's surface to be set aside for wild nature, commercialized only in ways that increase the diversity and the wildness of the native species of plant and animal in that landscape. I do believe that is the last hope that humanity has of saving the wild species that we still have left. I do believe that that is our challenge. It also meshes very well with the rewilding movement's idea of restoration of the landscape, ecological restoration, replanting, reforesting, reintroduction of species that once were there. What can we do? We can support local projects and international projects that aim to create wildland or recreate wildland or regrow wild territories, to protect wild species. So Richard, in closing, Richard's accidental poems of extinction, while unplanned, while unasked for, I didn't really want to write the poems, they horrified me that we've already killed off so many iconic species, and they horrified me at the scale of extinction that we've already unleashed on the planet. However, I hope that his poems may inspire anyone who reads them to know that extinction is forever, yet there is a viable solution. Our challenge is to rewild and reforest and restore ecologically those landscapes we still have left, semi-wild landscapes, tamed landscapes, restore them to being wildscapes once again, fast enough to stop the last species we have from going down the same path that we pushed the dodo, the aurochs, and the straight-tusked elephant. Thank you.